Alrighty. Unfortunately, I've already said some of my opinions before the stream had even started, so
About a few things.
I think I left off at I don't think Saren is as good as people say she is.
Oh, what a kicker.
Um, I think that's not what I want. I was hoping that X would, X out this, like, block the ad. Oh well. I guess I probably ought to get an actual ad blocker sometime, huh? I
I imagine.
think that the era of Saren being among the top crowd clear frames is over. I think she's still good at it, but I think that making her do it well is more work than it's worth compared to other equally equally good or better alternatives. And all of this probably means absolutely nothing to you, so I guess that's where that conversation gets left off.
I mean, you're talking to someone who mains Rhino and Limbo. I don't know what the word crowd clearing means, fortunately.
Well, with that in mind, we can jump to a frame that you use and say that I think Limbo is overhated.
I'd agree with
Where
that.
is he on this list?
B
B
tier,
tier.
looks like.
There is no tier lower than B tier on this list, which is in and of itself, like, the list is already kind of trash. That just makes it even more useless because, like, I don't know. I could swear this tier list had frames in C and D tier the last time I looked at it, but that could just be I've not looked at this in years probably. Um but yeah, I don't think Saren belongs in S tier. I don't think Araxia belongs in S tier. I think Araxia being here is just recency bias. I think she's a lot of fun, and I do think she's very good, but I don't know. Realistically, I think tiering Warframes is actually broadly a kind of futile endeavor. Here we go. I came here to criticize Overframe's tier list, and instead now I'm criticizing the very concept of tier lists in and of itself.
What a banger stream this is turning out to be, huh?
Um,
I do know what you mean, though.
there is not
I
a single bad frame, I don't think.
even
Like,
Urelli.
I don't like Urelli, but she's a very good frame, actually.
Is
Like,
she now?
this is going to turn into me opening up the simulacrum and just showing off dumb bullshit spaghetti code, isn't it? And I'm going to have to remember to change both my Discord stream and my stream source in OBS too.
Gotta love it. You can do your best to just explain it.
I
Theoretically.
could do that, but
That does sound like work.
so a much more popular and much more well-watched content creator than I has said, and I do not agree with this exactly as he said it, but I agree with some degree of the sentiment, has said that Urelli is just a better Neja. That was arguably true at the time. It is blatantly untrue now. Um, huh, what? Okay. Um, so
Yeah.
the general spark notes of Neja's kit, at least at the time, I'm gonna have to restart the game. It's broken. The general spark notes of Neja's kit at the time were that he had a weapon damage amp and he had really good crowd control and he had like a tanking ability. Functionally speaking, like mechanically speaking, Ureli is extremely similar. Warframe is not liking me very much today. I don't know why. Like for Neja, it is he has a weapon amp that is his blazing chakram. Any enemy hit by the chakram takes double weapon damage. And they also get set on fire. That's really good now. At the time, it was kind of just a niche after effect of the ability. He has crowd control in that his divine spears are crowd control. Any enemy that doesn't have overguard or some other special resistance to crowd control, it will impale on a spike and hold them there until the duration of the ability is over, or until it's deactivated manually.
That sounds useful.
It is very useful. It has become more useful since, but that's not really part of this conversation. He has tanking in that his warding halo will allow him to take reduced damage for a certain amount of damage. Mechanically, it works a lot like Iron Skin.
Now you're putting in the words I understand.
This is something I've told you before and encouraged you to try, and you've not done it.
I have not.
Ureli is very similar in a lot of ways. I think there's some issue with. You don't have Warframe installed right now, do you?
Nope.
I think there's some issue with like logins, like on their end, because that's the second time I've tried to log into Warframe and it's been a problem.
I have one friend who's currently playing.
I mean, it could be an issue on my end, but if it were, I would think that Discord and the stream would also be struggling. And as far as I can tell, neither of them is.
It seems to be working fine. I've got the stream open in another tab.
Um, I guess I am just gonna have to explain everything rather than showing it.
Good luck.
So Ureli also has a weapon amp and tanking and crowd control. In her case, I don't remember. Like in her case, Sea Snares is her weapon amp. It's an ability that, like, actually, it's double, like it's multi-purpose. It crowd controls enemies, like it kind of suspends them in the air, and then it also causes them to take bonus damage scaling to ability strength. So already we're off on a really strong foot because she has a better weapon amp than Neja does, if I remember correctly. I think it scales. I don't care enough to look it up right now. She
Understandable.
has crowd control. Her ultimate pulls enemies into a big bubble of water and holds them there. Again, like with Neja, as long as they're not overguarded. This also is a leg up over Neja because it pulls enemies into one spot, which means if you have punch through or AoE on your weapon, you can hit a bunch of enemies at a time. And she has tanking, which again, her tanking ability is functionally the same as Iron Skin, except that in her case, it summons Marilena, which is her little exalted K drive. Normally, she has to be riding Marilena to get the damage resistance. She has an augment that just makes it follow her around instead. Since then, Neja has gotten an augment that changes his gameplay loop enough that the two are no longer really comparable. But prior to that, as much as I don't want to admit it, yes, Ureli did basically do everything Neja did, but slightly better at the time. So Ureli certainly does not belong in B tier. She, at the very least, should be in whatever tier Neja is in, which I guess has to be A tier because he wasn't an S. Which doesn't make sense at all. Like, he's. Uh, Neja, again, we're back at the position of the very concept of a tier list doesn't work with Warframe. Like, there is there was a point in time where certain Warframes were just not any good. Right now, I don't think there is a single Warframe that the average player would complain about if you brought to a mission. There are certainly some Warframes that are easier or harder to use than others. There are some Warframes for sure that are, even if only slightly, better than others. But on average, I do not think any Warframe is distinctly worse than any other.
I see what you mean. So a lot of them have been very well rebalanced.
Yeah, and I do think there are still some that could use more rebalancing. But I think broadly speaking, in terms of Warframes, the game is currently pretty well balanced. Like, I think Limbo could use some changes. I don't think he's as bad as people act like, but I don't think he really offers a whole lot to a team right now. I think Equinox is in a similar place. Oberon, in theory, has a lot to offer to a team, but in practice, he's just kind of awkward to use right now and just way too energy hungry. But even
I
those
can see that.
three offer some degree of value to a team. How much and what value definitely varies from one to the next, but I would say they are all at least practical in some specific niche. Um, I guess all I can really do at this point is just pick through and pick and
Give your
choose
thoughts.
stuff. I think Caliban is dramatically, but is like the problem with this tier list is that, like, with it functionally only being split across 3 tiers. Here's the thing. B tier is described as solid options for specific tasks. The problem is right now that's what every frame is. There is no just, I mean, I guess realistically, yeah, like Wisp or Dante are practically universally applicable. There's no mission where where some part of their kit wouldn't go to waste. But if that's what we're judging according to, then I think they're the only S tier frames. Honestly, no, they wouldn't be the only ones. It's just that the other ones aren't in S tier. Like, I think Protea should be up there if that's where actually like frames that would have value in every possible mission type. Wisp and Dante are both strong picks. I think Protea would probably belong up there. She's got good damage and utility that practically no other frame has, although technically her utility is obtainable through the helmet. Um, Jade, I actually just learned recently, and I want to test this out before I say for sure, oh yeah, this is the case. But I've heard recently Jade can boost amp damage, and if that's true, that's a really big deal.
That sounds like it'd be.
Um, I should have used a different browser for like to record because I've got several Chrome windows open and now I have to search through all of them every time I need to find this. Um, I think a better name, or I think a better defining characteristic for S tier would be frames with extremely specialized utility that that other frames can't currently compete with. And with that in mind, I'd say Jade, I'm about to test it now, but like if the whole boosting, well, yeah, let me test it and then I'll come back to that.
Oh, fair enough.
Like I just finally managed to get the game to actually properly open. So I'm gonna have to use a different amp. Can I? I cannot change amps in the simulacrum. That's so stupid.
That is unfortunate.
Unless I cannot change amps in the simulacrum. Okay. Switch to just one enemy then and use the alternate fire. Corrupted heavy
I'll be
gunner.
right back. I'm gonna go
How
grab a
could
drink.
you?
Quite easily. Watch.
Well, that's a problem. Okay. Getting fairly reliable crits of 59 damage. So Deathbringer. And then, okay. That's a ridiculous amount of buff. What? Where did? Interesting. I forgot about that. Hmm.
Have you pissed anyone off yet?
If I have, no one has told me so.
They're so angry they're speechless.
So what I heard was right about Jade. She does enhance amp damage. With that being the case, she and Volt are the only frames, to my knowledge, capable of boosting amp damage.
That sounds incredibly helpful, though.
It is very, it is a very big deal because, like, if I had a second person that could help with testing this, it would be very helpful, but I don't. So,
Yeah, unfortunately. Ah, I wish I could help.
how could you do this to me? How could you not be helpful? I can't believe you.
It's part of my charm. I'm
Okay,
like this on purpose.
so actually, I should have just left that. Amps, generally speaking, have a very low base damage. Oh, I still had one alive. Oh well. That's practically nothing. If I do specifically aim for the head, at the very least, it's a little bit better, but it's still not very good damage. You can see how little damage it's doing to the heavy gunner. Typically, the only thing that will boost amp damage is operator arcanes and abilities. So, Void Strike gives me 1,000% damage, and you can already tell that's a dramatic improvement. I also have 2 Operator Arcanes equipped, one that increases damage, I think it's damage when I cast an ability, and one that increases amp crit rate when I run out of energy. In addition to that, I also have an Arcane on my Operator that gives me a heat damage bonus when I do the Void Dash, so that is a little bit of extra damage. So, like, combining that and this and the better fire mode, I can, after a few shots, manage to kill a very tanky enemy. But can't reset operator abilities, so I'll just have to wait for it to cool down. If I were to use build up the heat buff, because that also gives me sling strength, use Deathbringer, dash again to get the heat buff back. Again, because I'm still waiting for... There we go. That's like that's significantly more damage. Like, Deathbringer is a pretty significant buff, even if it seems to cut down to around a third in operator mode. And then Volt is with him, his buff, the buff comes from his electric shield. Electric Shield is also actually especially helpful for this, because I think it'll stop me from being staggered by the AoE. Electric Shield is a relatively comparable buff, it looks like, in terms of the damage it adds. So yeah, like, stuff that can boost amp damage is good just because there are a number of fights that force you to use amps for them. So it's definitely at least somewhat. It's very, very niche, but it's at least somewhat useful.
Yeah.
But like, because so many frames are good at everything, I'm inclined to think that a better S tier would be frames with specialized uses like that nothing else can do. So Jade and Volt would both go up there. Trying to think. What other frames have super specialized uses? Lavos can buff his weapons with almost any damage type. That is a pretty niche use as well, but also pretty useful in certain situations.
I could see that being helpful.
Funny enough, using this more specialized logic actually puts Saren back in S tier. We're going back into the game. Actually, this might do the trick. This might be good enough for... No, it won't. So, Saren also has a niche specialized use. One that Zaku can also kind of do, but he has a much harder time of it. I don't know if I have the right build. I have the right build. It would be better with Forma, but I'll just have to make do. So...
Stop eating trash.
What?
Do not eat trash.
I
I'm
was
talking to my
the
cat. Yes. Different cat this time.
So, Saren's specialized use is using this one particular shotgun. So, like, normally, I kill an enemy with it, he explodes for a tiny bit of damage, and it's practically useless. Admittedly, the explosion does scale to the max HP of the enemy you kill, but it's still very little damage for the most part.
I can see that.
I'm gonna have to respawn the little guys to actually show you this. That being said, because Saren's Toxic Lash works in a nearly unique way, that explosion damage becomes significantly larger.
Oh.
With a better build, it could instantly clear... Well, okay, yeah. Even just a handful of kills was enough damage to clear all the enemies in this group. The reason for that is because of how Toxic Lash works. The description... Okay, the description has been updated. It used to just say that it buffed the attack with toxin damage. What it does is it adds an additional hit to all of your attacks, and that additional hit deals toxin damage. That's not a big deal for a lot of weapons, but for this weapon, the additional hit is applied to the explosion caused by killing an enemy with this shotgun. The additional hit is also considered damage dealt by the shotgun, which means if that additional hit kills an enemy, that enemy also explodes. And
Oh
because of
boy.
that, Toxic Lash allows for these wild chain reactions of damage. Uh, and like as enemies die, they'll just continue to propagate the Toxic Lash damage because it's toxin damage. It poisons them. It's damage over time. Like they'll just continue to propagate the Toxic Lash damage as more and more enemies die. And more enemies will just take more and more damage.
You created the plague.
That is kind of the whole purpose of Sarah from her most core principles. But yes,
Wonderful.
there are a number of other weapons that there are at least 3 other buffs that work like this. There is Zaku's Zada's Whisper, which does void damage instead of toxin. The reason why Saren is so perfect for this is that the damage type of the explosion on this shotgun is corrosive, and most damage buffs won't apply to it. But corrosive damage buffs specifically will, and Saren can have one. No other frame, like, other frames can get corrosive damage buffs, but there is no other frame where you can combine an additional, like that, the Toxic Lash Zada's Whisper style of buff with a corrosive damage buff, except for Site 09, whose resupply does have that style of buff, but it's a much and the damage type of the buff can be decided on your own, but the damage of the buff is significantly lower. And it doesn't cause a DOT because Toxic Lash is poison, but in this case the buff I'm using is corrosive. If I were to use poison, it might work. Or if I were to use gas, it might work. Yeah, it did spread poison, so if I use something that spreads better. Yeah, like it's spreading, but Site
Not as
09
much as
just
Saren
can't
did.
buff as much as Saren does. Saren, in the end, I guess Saren really does deserve the S tier position because while her value as a crowd clear has reduced, the more I think about it, Oraxia might actually also deserve the S tier after all, too. Because I forgot her ultimate is also the same style of buff, if I remember correctly. Yes, it is. I've actually messed up a bit, though. So let me clean up all the ammo drops and reset this.
Think of it, I don't think I've seen Araxia yet.
She is pretty much brand new.
Yeah.
Later on, I can show you more specifically what she does, but since this is technically a just chatting stream, I don't want to spend too much time in game. But all that to say, Saren does earn her place as S tier because while she has her value as a crowd clear has fallen, her value as a weapons platform has only increased. Because she is, as far as I'm aware, the only frame capable of carrying 3 separate weapon buffs at the same time. Because Toxic Lash is a weapon buff in and of itself. Spores, her first ability, can be modified into a weapon buff with an augment. And then for some reason, Toxic Lash isn't considered a weapon buff by the Helminth system, so you're allowed to put an additional weapon buff in her kit. Any other frame that has a weapon buff built into their kit won't allow you to put an additional one in unless you replace their existing one. But Saren does for some reason.
I see.
Araxia, I had forgotten her ultimate functions as a weapon buff. That might be enough to. It is the same type of weapon buff, so that does certainly increase her value by quite a bit, on top of the fact that she is already very good otherwise. So she might actually be. I don't know. On the one hand, it does allow her to exploit the game spaghetti code in a similar way to Saren. On the other hand, the more frames can do it, the less unique and niche it becomes, and the more it fails to qualify for the S tier that I've kind of envisioned. I think Saren still makes it up there just because she can stack so many more buffs, but I think going by this definition, Zaku and Araxia both fall short.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Please tell me that didn't pick up on my mic.
What, the for fuck's sake, or something else?
Okay, good. Family's downstairs yelling.
What fun.
Always nice. No, it's not like we have devices that can. I don't want to get into it.
I don't know. I have. How much do we want me to sit here and go through? Should I just pull up my own new tier list for this?
Create one.
On the one hand, it's tempting. On the other hand, that starts to go against what I kept saying earlier about tier lists being. This isn't even something I think just about Warframe. This is something I believe, broadly speaking. I think tier lists fail to represent the actual practical value of units in games. Like, I think this is true of Warframe. I think this is true of, like, Zenless.
Practically, yes, but
Like, I could put together a tier list of what Warframes I really like playing, but if I did that, it would be such an absurdly top-heavy tier list. I really enjoy playing most of them.
what Warframes would you date, Ramp?
None.
Really? There's not a single one that you'd be interested in.
I was about to ask, do I look like a robot fucker to you? But I do really like Chingy. And I do really like Aegis in Persona 3. So maybe don't answer that question, actually.
Chingy, huh? That's what you're into? Alright.
Relative to other characters in Zenless, no. But
No, fair enough.
I do really like her, both design-wise and as a character.
Yeah, fair enough.
Man, maybe that's what the stream should have been, our critique earlier of that Smash tier list.
Oh, I'm sure it's still in your history somewhere.
I'm sure it is, but
If you want to pull up your browser history on stream, yeah.
Honestly, those tier lists are probably about the worst. Well, okay, no. I was looking up all that CCC concept art earlier.
Yeah, there
Although
was that.
realistically, like nothing would be visible on stream, so the fact that I've even said that is already as
It
bad
was
as it
for
would get.
research purposes. It was for
That
research
is literally,
purposes.
on the one hand, that is literally true. On the other hand, who is going to believe that?
That's okay. I'll vouch for you. That'll settle it. Your viewers can trust
I
me.
really don't think anyone is going to trust your vouching for me when they see that video when I finally get it edited and put up.
Don't you mean if?
I'm going
It
to
is
at least
3 hours
pretend to trust
long.
myself. The last time I had to edit a video, I like put it on double speed to watch through it. And like I'm at least able to relatively keep up with it.
I mean,
Um
I don't even remember some of the weird shit we said. I'll be honest. I
I'm
remember very
going
little of it.
to like put it up unlisted and let you have another look over it before it actually goes public.
All right, that works for me.
Because there's definitely some of that I'm taking out. Like most of what I'm taking out is just like family business that I talked about. But
Yeah, very, very personal stuff.
yeah. Um I guess I'll just
There was-
speed run the rest of this.
I mean,
Going
there was that bit where you stepped away and I was just talking to myself for a little bit, but yeah.
going by their definitions for this tier list. I really don't think there's a meaningful distinction between S and A tier with their definitions. Like, sure, there are some strong multi-purpose frames that are better than others, but not so significantly that I think they warrant their own entirely different tier. Um, if we are defining A tier as strong or good in most situations, I think Volt sits higher than Saren. I think he sits higher than Gauss. Definitely higher than Kalervo. I think Dante definitely. If we're saying S tier is A tier, but like above and beyond everything, like is just above and beyond everything else in A tier, but is described the same way. I think Dante is good where he is. I think Wisp is generally pretty good where she is. Like rethinking things now, I think Araxia probably is too. I think Mesa should fall a bit lower because she relies too heavily on ability damage. I think Volt sits higher because he has both good ability and weapon damage. The only thing Revenant really does is not die. There are a lot of other frames that do that. Maybe sure they're less effective than at it than he is, but it's still all he does. Um
What about the Void Rig? Where would you put that?
Necromex shouldn't be on a Warframe tier list. But between the two Necromex that exist, I definitely think Void Rig is the better one.
Fair
Um,
enough. I haven't been able to play around with Bone Widow yet, so fair enough.
let's see. Garda belongs much higher. If we're assuming that A tier is ordered, like if we're assuming higher up and further left is better, like ordered 1, 2, 3, etc. Garda belongs much higher up than she is. She has both strong crowd control and a her passive is one of the game's best weapon buffs. Um, where is Valkyr? She's in B tier. Valkyr is a better melee. Like Valkyr and Kalervo are basically pure melee frames. Valkyr is a better melee frame now than Kalervo. Kalervo does have some wider use cases though. He can crowd clear a little better and does have some synergy with sniper rifles, weirdly enough. Uh, let's see. I feel like Korra is my inclination would be to say that this tier list is more a popularity list than it is a functional tier list, but there are just some aspects of it that make it hard for me to believe to say that. Well, no, it does say community powered, so yeah, I think this is basically just a popularity list in practice.
Yeah,
Um,
these things tend to be.
so yeah, like if we're going by even with it being a popular, even if that's the case, there are some things that just I don't think really make sense with that being the case. But at the very least, that explains a lot of the issues I see with it. I feel like Rhino, like I would expect Rhino to be higher on a popularity list, and I'd expect Zaku to be lower, but maybe I'm just not as in tune with what people think of different frames as I thought. I'd expect Geyer to be lower too, not because she's bad or hard to use, but because you just have to get so deep into the game before you can get her. Same for Corvex and for Temple and for Side 09 for that matter. Well, Corvex is already pretty low. Um, I don't know. A lot of these in A tier I don't have terribly strong opinions on. A lot of them I think are just generally pretty good, but not enough to sit significantly above the rest. Uh Neja is another exploiter of the game spaghetti code in a very different way from the others, but that's way too much, way too dense of a topic to get into right now. Vorna is in the same boat as Neja. She exploits the game in the exact same way. Um, Zephyr is another spaghetti code exploiter. Chroma has some weird stuff going on with how his skills are coded, but it's not anything really dramatic. Caliban is wildly better than this list would imply, but I think he's so low because you can't get him until really late in the game. So he's losing the popularity contest because he's just so deep into the game.
That is unfortunate.
I think Nyx is losing just because her rework is still relatively recent, and a lot of players don't actually give frames tries after reworks. Kome is really, really strong and is available early game, but she's just so complicated to work out how to use her that I think people who get her early game try her and think, oh, she's just trash, and then don't touch her again.
I mean, that's how Oberon was with me, very very early on.
Oberon is actually in a really rough spot right now. He's way too energy hungry for kind of underwhelming effects at the moment. Like he is really good on paper, but in practice it just doesn't really work out.
Yeah, I hear you.
Um,
How do you feel about those shoes, though, Ramp?
I don't. A more interesting tier list might be helmet abilities, because when I looked at it earlier, I immediately saw something that I had some thoughts on. I don't think Gloom is S tier. For the majority of frames, all it really does is just slow enemies down around you. And I feel like if crowd control is what you're looking for, you're much better off with Breach Surge. Breach Surge is not, you have to cast it more often, but it is a much more reliable crowd control because it's a blind instead of a slow, and it deals massive damage when set up right. Um, Again, assuming that individual tiers are ordered, I think Eclipse has fallen way, way down to a very low tier. I think worse than Decoy, but that's because Decoy has a special trick it can use. I think Zada's Whisper. Uh, I personally think Zada's Whisper is better than Dispensary, but I also know most Warframe players are not willing to actually be good at the game, and so need desperately lean on Dispensary as a crutch for their poor energy management. Um,
Oh, fair.
Wrathful Advance is really good, but I think it's too niche to be this high up. It's a really strong buff and a good mobility tool, but it's a mobility tool that goes to waste a lot of the time with how mobile Warframe already is, and the buff is only for melee weapons. Uh, hmm.
I definitely understand why Rhino's Roar is at the top of that list, though.
Oh yeah, it 100% belongs up here. Like it is outside of very niche use cases where you want a different one for a specific purpose. It is the best weapon buff or the best damage buff in the helmet. A, because it is a modifier you cannot get in large volumes elsewhere, and B, because it applies to abilities and not just weapons, and it is the only buff that does that. Um, I think Breach Surge should be up in S tier instead of Gloom. I think Gloom should be in A or maybe even as far down as B tier. I think in most cases, Warcry may be a better melee buff than Wrathful Advance. Wrathful Advance is very good, but I think it is kind of niche. It's at its best on weapons with low base crit, like low base crit rate, but high base crit damage. And I'm not actually sure if there are any melee weapons like that. Well, okay. It's at its best on weapons with low base crit rate as long as the crit damage is at least decent. Like basically it can allow melee weapons to crit that wouldn't normally be able to. That's kind of its niche. It's still good even on weapons with higher crit rates, but I think hitting more times is going to be more valuable a lot of the time.
Yeah, I see the logic in that.
Theros Strike is probably the best armor strip right now, so I'd say it's a pretty good A tier. Pillage is a very good ability. I think it's also Theros Strike and Pillage, I think, are kind of different flavors of the same thing. They both strip shields and armor from enemies, while Pillage restores the shields of your team. Theros Strike restores health for, I think, only yourself, admittedly. So, like, Pillage is okay. No, the shields are not for your team; they're just for yourself. So basically, Theros Strike if you need, like, they're both good armor and shield strips. Theros Strike is for if you need healing. Pillage is for if you want over shields instead, so you don't have to heal in the first place. Pillage does have a much higher ability strength breakpoint, which can make it harder to build around as its biggest thing. But it's it's a 360 degree rate. Like it's all around you, whereas Theros Strike is only a cone in front of you. Like both abilities are a bit of give and take, but in the end, they are basically just different flavors of the same thing. I think they're both very good. A tier is decent for them. Larva and Ensnare are also different flavors of the same thing. I think Ensnare has more range, if I remember correctly, and range is kind of the all important factor when it comes to grouping abilities. Let's see. Element. And injecting and replacing abilities. Yeah, that's where I want. Okay. Ensnare doesn't show me the range right here. Range for Larva, 8 meters on Helminth, and Snare, 10 meters, it looks like. So yeah, and Snare is slightly more range, but it acts a little slower and has to target an enemy. Larva can just be placed on the ground, has less range, but like can be placed on the ground instead of having to target an enemy and triggers instantly. Ensnare also has the effect, the unique among all grouping abilities effect of not ragdolling enemies when it groups them, which is useful on Nezha, but I'm not sure it matters anywhere else. Thermal Sunder is broken. That's all that needs to be said about it. If you put it on Rhino, I think it quadruple dips with Iron Skin for some reason, or not Iron Skin, with Roar for some reason.
Neat.
Um, I'm kind of torn on my opinion of Silence. On the one hand, I do feel like it's a very niche ability. On the other hand, the niche is shutting down some of the most annoying enemies in the game.
I'd
So
say shutting down annoyances is one of the better niches that something can have.
Silence nullifies Eximus. Like they still have Overguard, but they can't use their abilities unless they cast them before they entered the range.
That sounds worth it to me. I
Like
hated
I
working with
can't
Eximus units.
immediately think of any frame I'd put Silence on, but it is just an incredibly useful effect. Moving on to B tier. Lycath's Hunt. I cannot think of any frame besides Vorna that I would use it on. So I think it honestly probably goes lower, should be lower than it is. Elemental Ward has some really niche interactions with other abilities and with certain arcanes, but I think it's generally about where it belongs in B tier. Rest and Rage is awful. Maybe not. It's again, I can't think of. Well, let me look at something first before I say what I was about to. Rest and Rage. And then Quiver. Okay. Helminth version of Quiver cannot use the sleep arrow, so it's not actually a functional comparison. Um, so Rest and Rage. Rest puts enemies to sleep in a 5-meter radius around wherever you target. 5 meters is very small. Again, if you're looking for crowd control, I think you're just straight up better off with Breach Surge. It costs a lot more energy, but it's just better. You get so much more for what you spend. Rage makes enemies take more damage, but it also makes them move faster. And I don't know if there are any other vulnerability. Technically, Weird Scythes is a vulnerability power, so I'm just going to go ahead and say Rest and Rage is just bad. It's okay on Equinox herself because you can kind of play around and make a sort of eternal sleep build that keeps enemies asleep almost permanently. But
It works better
as
with
a
her kid, I'm guessing.
not really.
No?
There's just no reason to use it. Like if you're gonna make that build, there's not really anything any other frame does to improve it compared to her. So there's no reason to put the ability on another frame. Just use her for that build.
I see. It doesn't work very well with any build besides that, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
pretty much.
I
Yeah.
got you.
Um, Condemn is in a similar situation. It's kind of really only good on Harrow. If Pillage didn't exist, I'd say Condemn was a really good shield restoring ability, but Pillage exists and restores shields a lot better than Condemn does. The only reason you'd ever want to use Condemn over Pillage is Pillage doesn't work if your enemies have neither shields nor armor, but that is a very rare situation, and also you can't really just go and swap helmet abilities at the drop of a hat to accommodate that. So you're kind of just better off hoping Pillage is pertinent to whatever situation you take the frame into. Shooting Gallery is a damage buff. It does also crowd control enemies a bit. Oh, it's a damage buff for the team, but it only applies to one ally at a time, and it's random who it applies to at the time, if I remember correctly.
So good if everyone's clustered together, but otherwise too
No.
finicky.
Like, it, if anything, I'd say it's at its best when other players are further away because it means the buff will just stay on you instead of going to them.
Okay.
Uh, Also,
So it's
25%
random
is not
within
a
a range.
really high buff, I don't feel like. And it's additive with damage mods, so I think it's kind of just a mediocre ability the more I read. Um,
I see.
Resonator is kind of just like mobile crowd, like continuous crowd control. It can kind of group enemies, but it's not going to as reliably as an ability specifically designed to group enemies. Um, I think it's at its best just used on Octavia because it synergizes with one of her other abilities. I think it's just kind of mediocre as a helmet. Null Star is wildly inconsistent depending on what frame you put it on. It is hilariously strong on Neja. I feel like I remember seeing a Harrow build that used it. Um, but I think generally If it's, I think it's generally going to be at its best either left on Nova and used with the rest of her kit, or on Nezha because of the particular bullshit he can do with status effects. Terrify has kind of fallen behind. It used to be a really good pull for armor strip, but now it's just kind of not. It is one of only a small handful of armor strips that has a limited duration, like both Theros Strike and Pillage mentioned earlier. Like when they strip armor, it's permanent. And like with Pillage, it's hard to get a full armor strip with it, but you can just stack it on itself to get that full strip. With Terrify, it's not permanent. It doesn't stack on itself, although it doesn't really need to. It has a really the value of Terrify as opposed to the other two is that it has a much lower ability strength requirement to fully strip armor. What it comes with, though, to kind of work against that is that it only strips for a certain duration. It only strips a certain number of enemies at a time. And
And
it
it makes them run away,
and it makes them run away.
which is
Um,
exactly what you want.
you usually, if you're making an enemy take more damage, you would rather them be where you can do damage to them.
Not running in the opposite direction, getting
Pretty
away.
much, yeah.
No, that was sarcasm. I understand.
Really, the only benefit it gets is the fact that it has a lower strength requirement than the others. If for some reason it's a bad thing to have 200% strength on a build, Terrify will get the same effect as Theros Strike, or like in terms of armor, for I think only 175% strength. The other issue with it is that while Pillage and Theros Strike are both a shield and armor strip, Terrify is only an armor strip. It does not apply to shields. Um, Defy is radial damage and an armor buff. It's okay. I think it falls dramatically short of a lot of the other abilities in the same tier. Spectre Age, ever since Dispensary was added, this became completely useless. Like, its crowd control, its value before was that it had an augment that would let it generate energy orbs, but now Dispensary generates energy orbs with no messing around like this has.
Just
So,
directly.
yeah. So this has, and again, if you're pulling it for the crowd control, just use Breach Surge. Weird Scythes is crowd control and viral proc, which doesn't sound like much, but viral status is extremely strong. Even with just a single stack, it doubles the damage enemies take. I think at 10 stacks, it makes enemies take like quadruple plus damage. So like, if it were just viral priming, I'd say just use Nourish instead. If it were just crowd control, I'd say use Breach Surge instead. If for some reason there's some specific niche where you need to do both of those on one ability, Weird Scythes is your best bet, but I don't think that niche exists. And also your pet can prime viral for you.
Yeah,
Or,
fair.
or you can just be lazy like me and just build all your weapons for viral. Fire Blast is an amazing ability on Ember and is trash on everyone else. It can be used to strip armor, but it's not very effective at it other than on Ember. Other than stripping armor, all it really does is give you a tiny amount of damage in a circle around you. Quiver is trash.
Nice.
Coil Horizon is another grouping ability. What is its range? Coil Horizon. 12 meters, no reduction for helmet, which makes it, I think, the highest range grouping ability, unless airburst. Let me check that before I say that. Yes, Coil Horizon with its 12 meters of range does seem to be the best grouping ability. The problem with it is that it this is going to be another needing to pull up the game to explain it situation. So, Coil Horizon. That's the wrong build. I can't show it there. Coil Horizon, like any other grouping ability, you either target an enemy or you target a location. Like you either target an enemy and enemies are grouped around your target, or you just plant it at a location. Like Larva would just go directly where I aim and group enemies around that railing. Coil Horizon, instead, you throw it and it bounces around and rolls around and falls, and like if you throw it against a wall, it'll roll back at you. If you throw it up a slope, it'll roll down the slope, or it'll treat it like a ramp. If you're
Well, that's
trying
fun.
to, it's interesting. And if you're trying to just group enemies that you're in the middle of, then you can just instantly trigger it. But if you're trying to group enemies that are further away, you have to like lob it. And I'm terrible at aiming, so it doesn't really work very well. Like, if this were Larva, I would have gotten that bunch of enemies in one try, but because I have to, like, lob it and account for its dropping and bouncing, it took me 3. Or if it were Ensnare, that also would have only taken me 1 try. So, it's the longest range out of all the grouping abilities, but it's also one of, like, the most temperamental grouping ability. So, I'd say B tier is a pretty good spot for it. Blood Altar is trash. Smite, there are some really niche meme uses for it. You can use it to like insta-kill enemies, like to insta-kill really durable enemies if you like do a specific thing. I don't remember how it works. You have to jump through a lot of hoops for it to work, but I think people do it in level cap because it's just, as I understand, just a guaranteed insta-kill regardless of level. Spellbind. It's crowd control and status immunity. If you want crowd control, again, use Breach Surge. If you want... I'm not sure if there's status immunity anywhere else in the helmet, now that I think about it. Uh, see. I am pretty sure Spellbind is the only source of status immunity in the helmet. But there are 3 other abilities, Pillage being one of them, that will cleanse status effects, and I think that's just as good. So Yeah, it's status immunity and crowd control. If for some reason you need both of those on the same ability, then there it is, but I can't think of any situation where you'd need both of those in the same ability. Sentient Wrath is decent on Caliban and useless on everyone else. Radial Blind is Breach Surge minus, so why would you use it? Reeve is really weird, and you can take advantage of how it's coded if you're using Ureli, or maybe Neja too, but Ureli is the easier one to do. Shuriken
Oh
is
boy.
trash. Basically, Reeve does a percent of the enemy's health as true damage, which means if you can get it up to 100%, it's a guaranteed kill. Problem is, the starting amount is 8%. 8% is not very much, and you would need, like, a lot, an absolutely ridiculous amount of ability strength to make that insta-kill. Let's see.
That's funny though.
Maximization.
That such a thing is theoretically possible.
You would need 1,244% ability strength in order for it to insta-kill enemies in a vacuum. The reason why it's a good ability on Revenant himself is that 8% goes up to 40 if the enemy is under the effect of one of his other abilities, which
Oh,
means he only needs like 240 something, I think.
much better.
Yeah, he only needs 249% instead of 1,200 something. Ureli has the damage vulnerability built into her first ability, and that damage vulnerability stacks with ability strength, which means, and I might actually be able to show this on overframe. Ureli Prime, new build. We'll replace Marilena because I don't like it. Reeve is what we're looking for. Right, there's not actually going to be any way to show this, but basically, there's some sweet spot of ability strength where the damage vulnerability from sea snares is enough to increase the damage dealt by Reeve enough to make it an instant kill. I do not care enough to sit here and figure that exact breakpoint out right now, but it is certainly easier than getting 1,200% ability strength.
Oh yeah. I mean, sure.
Uh,
Why not? Go ahead, figure it out. Well, we've got one more to go over. Make them wait extra long for a Zephyr.
I'm not even at Zephyr yet. We're at Neja.
Are you not? Okay, no,
Firewalker is
you're going over Reeve. I gotcha.
Firewalker can cleanse status. That's kind of the only useful thing it has. If you want a status cleanse, just go back up to pillage. Pull is another grouping ability. Uniquely, as far as I'm aware, among grouping abilities, it does group the enemies right in front of you instead of at wherever you aim. So that has some degree of niche use, but I think it does have a 12.5 meter range, which technically is the same as recoil horizon, except that's 12.5 meters in front of you instead of 12.5 in a radius. So in practice, it's a smaller area of effect. Molt is everyone's go-to ability to remove from Saren, so why would you put it on someone else? Lull is crowd control, so again, just use Breach Surge. Shock is just a little bit of damage in front of you, but it can be turned into a weapon buff, so it has some niche value, hypothetically. Actually, Shock has a very specific use as an ability to allow weapons to synergize with melee influence, which is a melee arcane that basically makes lightning status effects break the game.
Oh boy.
Am I gonna have to pull the game back up again? I probably should. So, melee influence. I'll just do this the easy way. Actually, no, this is the easier way. So, melee influence. If I spawn a brand new group of guys, I throw my throwing hammer into the midst of them, and it throws a few of them around the room, but it doesn't kill anyone. Kill them, respawn them, spin around in the middle of them until I trigger melee influence, throw the hammer in the middle. It still didn't actually. They're not actually close enough together for this to work. I don't think. It'll be. Wait. This was not actually the easiest method after all. So let's try the other hammer. So, new group of enemies, new weapon. Slam in the middle of them. They all take some damage, but nothing else really happens. Little guys are dying, but that's it. Kill them. Respawn them. Spin around in the middle until influence triggers. Slam. Almost all dead. Melee influence makes it so that whenever I proc lightning, it has a chance to give me this buff. As long as this buff is active, every status effect my melee weapon applies will be spread to every enemy within a certain range.
I see the power in that now.
What I'm doing with this hammer is that it's heavy, like its slam attacks guarantee blast procs. So basically, I'm using melee influence and then slamming in the middle of a crowd to just make every enemy in that crowd take a massive number of blast procs all at once, and it just insta-kills them all. You can also use it on a weapon like the Zorus, because the Zorus throw explosion guarantees a lightning effect even if there's no lightning on the weapon. So I can throw it into the middle of them, and I'll get melee influence even though I don't have actual lightning damage on this weapon. And I can just keep throwing it in there and keep proccing more and more lightning on them indefinitely. And there's something wrong with this build because it shouldn't be doing radiation, but it still killed them all in the end. There is a lot of just absolutely ridiculous bullshit you can do with melee influence, and using shock as your helmet ability, along with its augment that turns it into a buff, can synergize with melee influence so that you don't have to mod it onto your weapon, mod lightning onto your weapon. Aqua Blades is kind of just radial damage around you. I don't think it's very much, but I have seen a build where someone was able to do a lot of damage with it, so maybe I just don't really know how it works. If I were to make a Yoreli like if I were to put a helmet on Ureli, Aqua Blades is probably what I'd replace unless I learn something about it that I don't know already, which let's find out if I'm about to learn something about it. Does a set amount does 750 damage, guaranteed status chance, like guaranteed slash status. Stuns enemies around you, so it is a kind of mobile crowd control. Uh, it does have an augment that lets you launch the blades, like it collects damage whenever the spinning blades hit an enemy, and then it lets you launch them for the collected damage. And I've seen a build where someone used that for pretty good effect. But
Fun now.
it does seem fun. I think Aqua Blades might actually be one of the rare examples of an ability that might be better on a different frame rather than its original one. I skipped over Petrify entirely. I have a meme build for Necros because Petrify has a looting augment, so that lets me stack 2 different looting abilities on one frame. But I think other than that, it's really only useful on Atlas, and even on Atlas, it's only useful to help him build up his passive. Airburst is another grouping ability. I believe it has the most damage out of all grouping abilities, but if you're using a grouping ability, you probably aren't using it for its damage. You're using it to set enemies up for a gun or a melee weapon or a different ability. But it is interesting just because it does damage scaling to the number of enemies it pulls, I believe.
Sounds like it could be good.
It does also have an augment that increases your secondary damage for every enemy hit by one cast. But I'd be willing to bet that it's probably just normal weapon damage. In which case it's yep, additive with mods like Hornet Strike. So it's just normal weapon damage. You'd be better off with Roar, even if it's a smaller amount of bonus. C tier. Well of Life. Yeah, I think that's about right. Tesla Nervos. The only thing I even use those for on Vobin is to trigger Archon Stretch. Vile Rush. Huh. Unless it does something that I special that I don't know of, then it probably is about where it belongs. Yeah, like its damage is significantly less than it would be on Lavos. It can't benefit from his passive on any other frame, and like his passive is a big part of what makes his abilities good. Tempest Barrage, I think, is actually pretty good with its augment, but I don't know. You know what? Let's actually try it out on a group of enemies real quick. See if it's really at all effective without support.
One sec, I'm gonna turn my AC on and go grab a beer.
How could you?
Oh, you'll be fine.
No, I won't. I'll be dead.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's kind of no good without any kind of support. Well, that was probably just one of the butchers. It's not very good without some kind of ability to support it, and it also pushes enemies out of its cast area. So, like, in conjunction with Breach Surge, it's okay. But even in conjunction with Breach Surge, it's just okay. Viral priming is useful, but that's about the only useful thing it seems to do. At least as a helmet ability. Or viral priming and armor stripping.
Back. What'd you find?
Tempest Barrage is viral priming and armor stripping. I know I said before, if you want viral priming, just use Nourish or a pet. I will say, I feel like Tempest Barrage builds up more viral faster than a lot of alternatives, and also armor strips, although it's not permanent. Because like one cast, and I've already got some enemies up to 10 stacks of viral. It is definitely better on Hydroid than it would be on any other frame. But at the very least, I don't think it would be entirely useless on another frame. It wouldn't be great,
Okay.
but it wouldn't be terrible. I'm not sure that it would be good enough to move up a tier. Well, okay. I think it's dramatically better than any of the other things in C tier. So I do think it would probably move up to the bottom of B tier. Honestly, it probably would move up further than the bottom of B tier. Desiccation is crowd control, just use Breach Surge. Mind Control relies a lot on benefiting from Nyx, mostly from her passive.
And if I remember correctly, that's shoot them to increase their health and
No,
damage.
that's just a component of the ability, but I'm pretty
Okay.
sure it gains some benefit from her passive. I don't remember for sure. I do wonder if, like, Mag could bubble an enemy, like could take mind control and then like bubble an enemy and then mind control it, so it would kind of serve as a mobile bubble. But I am not curious enough about that to spend materials for the helmet just to try it.
Understandable.
Banish is really niche. I've been considering putting it on my Wukong, but only because I used that Wukong build mostly for rescues, and it would be nice to be able to get the guy, banish him, and not have to worry about him going down. That's the
Well,
only. Go ahead.
I'm incredibly surprised at how helpful Banish is for escort missions.
Hmm?
Like, as someone who's been using Limbo for a long time, I've heard people bashing Limbo constantly. And seeing how helpful it can be for the more annoying parts of like escort missions, and especially that Grenier endless one where you have
Hmm.
to get all the You had to get all the survivors to a ship or something.
Mm-hmm.
I loved how trivial Banish made that, pretty much.
Limbo is often my go-to frame for um I've forgotten the name of it, for operative defense missions. Like the defense missions where you're defending a guy instead of an object.
Yeah,
Honestly,
yeah,
he's a very strong pick for normal defense missions too.
yeah. That bubble is incredibly helpful
Um,
when you're able to make it small enough, last long enough.
yeah. I mean, say that again. Sorry, you went all robot mode for a second.
Sorry about that. When you have the ability to make the bubble small enough to encompass the defense while lasting long enough that, well, obviously it lasts longer,
See, you
so
don't.
that enemies can't shoot it.
There are two responses I have to that. And first is you don't need to make it small. Um,
Right, we do have stasis.
you do have stasis, and that's honestly the real reason why the bubble is good for defense. But
Yeah,
also
no,
in
you
terms
got a
of
point.
duration, Cataclysmic Continuum is an augment for his ultimate that increases its duration by 1 second for each enemy killed inside it. It might just be in general for each enemy killed. That is all it says on the description. That being said, we are talking specifically. Like, I do think Limbo is a lot better than he gets credit for. That's something we can talk about later. But
Yeah, we're
talking
talking
about
about the helmet
Banish as
stuff.
a helmet ability, it's not very good. There is one use I can think of for it, and outside of that, I mean, C tier is only situationally useful. It is useful in one situation.
Technically, situationally useful. What the
D
fuck
tier.
is texting me? No,
I am going to say that I think Decoy belongs higher up on this list. I certainly think it's better than Saren's Molt. Decoy got an augment recently that makes it generally pretty good. I've heard that like basically the Decoy got an augment that makes it so that enemies who attack, like that apply, like basically that instead of placing a holographic decoy, you make an enemy into your decoy, and enemies that attack the decoy take damage and like take damage and random status effects. I've heard that you can also helmet it
incredibly
onto
helpful.
Nyx and have your decoy and mind control be the same person, be the same enemy.
That sounds incredibly helpful.
Yeah, damage decoy. Decoy can be cast on enemies. Enemies who attack that decoy receive 5 random status effects, and the reflected damage is increased by 350%. Does decoy reflect damage innately? I don't think so.
So you put that on an enemy and then mind control the enemy
Yes.
to then give it a whole bunch more health.
Yes. I think mind controlled enemies are just straight up like invulnerable, actually.
No, they're not invulnerable. They can die. At least since last I checked.
I mean,
I
when is the
remember
last time you checked?
when we were doing a whole bunch of the Undercroft missions.
When? Like, you've not had Warframe installed in a very long time, right?
It's been a couple months.
Have you used Nyx since she got a rework?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. Let me see. Last played April 3rd.
I don't remember when she got the rework. But I do have the game open, so I can find out if. Okay, yeah. Mind control target does take damage.
I would assume so. That's why being able to shoot them to increase their health is so helpful.
It doesn't increase their health, it only increases their damage.
Are you certain?
Yes.
All right.
Actually, where is my mind control target? Okay, no, they are fully invulnerable once you hit them with mind control. I just lost track of it and thought I was looking at the wrong enemy. Yeah, for the
Well, you're
duration
not
of mind
streaming this
control, they
stream.
do not take any damage at all. Well, okay, I think they take damage you do to them, and I think it's dealt once you deactivate mind control. But, like, that's the only damage they take. So yeah, mind control and decoy both have potential to be good. I'd have to actually test them out. Which I've not done. Um, I think Eclipse has no real place anywhere on a tier list since it's rework. Rework for Mirage herself, kind of a buff for Mirage herself. A dramatic nerf for the Helminth version, though. Um,
Damn, some good beer. I'm not even sure if it is beer. It's not like flavored. It's like peach flavored Jack Daniels. It just says Jack Daniels Southern Peach. I wish I didn't read that.
Probably either a flavored beer or a cider.
Yeah, it says flavored beer, but it I don't taste any beer in that.
Sounds like a good beer.
Yeah, the best kind of beer, the kind you don't taste.
I don't
Not
like
the
the
kind that
taste of
doesn't
beer.
taste like beer.
Um,
I've definitely warmed up to it very recently. It has to be good beer, though.
yeah. I think if for some unknowable, incomprehensible reason, some random person is looking at an hour and 45 minutes into a random live stream for advice on what Helminth ability they should be using.
Roar.
Um, Roar or Breach Surge or Nourish if you need energy income. Like Roar or Nourish if you want a damage buff, Roar for better damage, Nourish if you need extra energy or viral priming.
Silence if you really fucking hate Eximus units.
Theros Strike or Pillage if you need armor and shield strip. Theros if you need healing, and Pillage if you need overshields. Pillage is a bit harder to build around, but still good even if you can't hit its breakpoint. Breach Surge if you need crowd control because it's the best crowd control in the Helminth, I think, and also very good damage. Also, Breach Surge, if you need an ability that complements other abilities that do a lot of hits of damage, even if the individual hits are not very strong, Breach Surge will make them a lot stronger. Zada's Whisper if you know how to break the game, but you probably don't if you're looking at some random live stream for helmet ability advice.
Which, if you are, hello, thank you for dropping in. Why?
Thermal Sunder if you're specifically looking for a helmet ability to put on Rhino. Like
Which
that's,
one does that do?
I think Rhino is the only frame I would put Thermal Sunder on, but on him it's really, really good.
Why is that? Did we go over that?
It quadruple dips with Roar.
Oh, yes, I remember now.
Or no, technically what it is, I think, is it quadruple dips with ability strength on Rhino. Because it double dips with Roar because faction damage always applies double to DOT. And then also both of them benefit from ability strength.
I
Uh,
see.
Wrathful Advance if you desperately need a ton of extra crit damage on a melee weapon. Warcry if you don't need, or crit chance, I mean. Warcry if you don't need the crit chance but want a melee, a bit like an ability to enhance melee. I'd say as much as Coil Horizon has the extra range, I'd definitely say Ensnare or Larva if you want a grouping ability. Ensnare for slightly more range, but a slower effect. Larva for a faster effect and one that can be targeted anywhere instead of having to target an enemy unit. Coil Horizon is better than either of them if you're just going to launch it right at your feet and immediately blow it, but other than that, it's not very good. Everything else from here on, I think, is specific to if you really know what you're doing with a specialized build. Like, there are a lot of other really good options here, but also dispensary if you need energy. But like that's really the only thing you're getting from it that you can't get elsewhere. And honestly, even that you can kind of get elsewhere. I think I said this before, but I think dispensary is really just a crutch for people who have bad builds. Um, but yeah, like there are a lot of other abilities here that have really specialized uses for certain frames, but for the most part, I think that's kind of it. Like use roar if you need damage, use nourish if you need damage and energy. Uh ensnare or nidus or ensnare or larva as you prefer for grouping. Pillage or Theros Strike as your build prefers for armor and shield strip. Wrathful Advance or Warcry as your weapon prefers for melee. Breach Surge for crowd control. And Silence if you just really, really hate Eximus.
One.
Honestly, though, as good as Silence is, if I need it, I'll just run Banshee. I can't think of any frame that I'd actually put Silence on over one of their existing abilities.
Be right back. My puppy's causing trouble.
Fun.
You get out. One. Go. Downstairs. Go downstairs. Go down. All right, I apologize.
No worries.
Now let's do arc wings.
Sure. Use the Amisha. The others are all bad. There you go.
Oh,
There you
okay.
go. Arcwing
All
tier
right.
list done.
Now I got to go over all the weapons too.
Masalan is the best arc gun. Uh that's kind of it.
I've heard good things about the Kuva Grattler.
I've heard Silas and Charlie obsess over the Kuva Grattler because they like how it looks. I've heard
It
basically
does
nothing
look
about its
badass.
actual strength.
It does look very good.
It does look very good. Um,
I
I know
want
the
to use it
Larkspur
on my
Prime was
Rhino.
the best arc gun when it released. I would imagine it remains good. The reason I would put the Masolin above it is because the Masolin has functionally infinite range, while the Larkspur Prime is a beam weapon and therefore has a very limited set range. Also, to my knowledge, the Masolin is the only non-beam arc gun that is hit scan. So with all of the others, you would have to lead your target, and that is a huge pain to do in Arcwing.
I want to use a Kuva Grattler as my primary weapon when on foot.
You can do that.
That sounds like fun. I know I can. I haven't unlocked the ability to.
Ah.
It seems like fun.
Uh, for arc melee weapons, I think it's kind of just use whatever you prefer. I'm pretty sure the Iron Bride is part of the Bone Widow's ultimate, so I don't think you can use it outside of that. Maybe I'm wrong. Um, yeah, basically use the Amisha as your Arcwing. Use I guess any of these arc guns up at the top here. I don't know anything about the Imperator Vandal. It's probably good. Um, I'll briefly skim over the S tiers of all the weapon classes. Why not? Ceto Prime is really good. Fenmore is pretty good. Nautaruk is hilariously strong, as is the Torrid. The Ceto should not be in the same tier as the Ceto Prime because it's just a blatantly worse version of the Ceto Prime. I don't think the Archiplasmor and the Basicist should be in the same tier either because the Basicist is just a better Archiplasmor.
I don't see a Corinth in any of these anywhere here.
That's because the community has no taste.
Terrible list.
Corinth Prime is in A tier. Uh,
Unacceptable. How dare you, community?
it's as tempting as it is. There are too many weapons to go over every tier of every weapon. Maybe I'll extend my skim to the A tier as well.
I'm curious what the community has put in the F tier, or at least the lowest
There
tier.
are a lot of blatantly just bad weapons in Warframe. Like Hind is not good. Like a lot of these are weapons that have improved versions of that there are improved versions of. Like the Bratton has a Prime and a Vandal version. The Penta has a Syndicate version. Paris has a Prime. Latran has a Prime. Strun has a Prime. Volkar has a Wraith. Although the Volkar Wraith is also kind of mediocre. Boar has a Prime. There's the Strun again. Quanta has a Vandal, although that's at best niche. There's the Bratton again. There's the Paris again. Burston has a Prime and an Incarnate Adapter, which actually is also true of the Bratton, Paris, Latran, and Strun, and Boar. Gorgon has Wraith and Vandal versions and an Incarnate Adapter. Dara has a Vandal version and an Incarnate Adapter. Hind has a Kuva version. I think there's a Tenant Tetra. So yeah, like every weapon in D tier has an improved version of it. So it wouldn't make sense for these to not be fairly low.
From here, how far up do we have to go before we find something you disagree with? Rating wise.
I think the Harpak probably should be lower, but I might just be biased against it. Uh,
Why is the Tiger so low? I mean,
because the generic
besides
one
there
is
being a
kind of
prime.
mediocre.
Besides there
It's
being a prime
of
version.
course the ad I was trying to exit disappeared just as I clicked the exit button.
Careful, you're gonna summon Charlie.
The Tigress is so low because the generic version is kind of mediocre. There are two
I
better
love the
versions of it.
Tiger.
There is a Prime and a Syndicate version.
Not fair
I
enough.
think the
I love
Dara
the
Vandal
Tiger.
belongs higher now that it has an incarnate adapter. I think that's the first thing I'm going to heavily disagree with here. I want to say the Gorgon Wraith should sit higher, but it could just be that I think so because I like it, because I think it looks and sounds better than the Prisma. Um,
One of these days, I need to actually try to use the Opticore. It seems like a very fun weapon to use.
you should get the Opticore Vandal instead. As much as
That's
I
what I've heard.
like the generic one feels like weightier and more impressive, but in practice it's not. It's just worse. Like the generic one has a slower charge and a smaller magazine and much higher base damage per shot, but the Vandal has much higher DPS. I think the
Unfortunate.
Dex Sybaris should go higher. Its incarnate adapter is both pretty strong and really fun. I think the Comarex belongs higher. I got it a lot during a recent clan event, and it carried me through quite a few runs. Like there was a clan event that was based around a new Duviri game mode, so weapons were randomized, and I got the Comarex a lot, and it really carried me through that event several times. I think the Bosmu is better than B tier as well. Um, the Paragale is kind of broken, but it is pretty limited. So, I mean, this is A tier already. So, honestly, I don't think I'm going to really strongly disagree with anything past here. Like, I think the tier list for weapons is just kind of stupid because it's basically a popularity contest, and frames that are did I say for weapons? I meant the tier list for warframes is kind of stupid because it's functionally just a popularity contest, and frames, with it just being a popularity contest, frames are going to fall lower if they are harder to use, even if in reality they
Yeah.
are better than the easier to use ones. With weapons, most of them are not going to be all that hard to use. Like, most of them are point and click. There are some that are a little more complicated, but usually the most complicated they get is point and press a different button other than click. And like that's not really a huge deal. Um I think the Stalta is S tier personally. I think level cap players would agree with me. Uh
I've definitely heard you gush about it before.
it is just ridiculously powerful. Um is the Fullman Prime in S tier? No. The Fullman and Fullman Prime are both in the same tier, but again, if we assume the tier is ordered, then I don't think that's entirely unreasonable. Um, there's the Kuva Sobek, the gun I was showing you with Saren before. Honestly, with Saren, the Kuva Sobek is S tier. Without her, I think it's pretty low. Like maybe B at most. Burston Prime, I'd be inclined to say S tier, but I don't know. I might just be what's the word? Like biased in its favor. Um I don't know. Broadly speaking, I think besides the fact that the Ceto Prime and Ceto being in the same tier is kind of ridiculous, I think there's a much larger gap than that between the two of them. Uh, Proboscis Cernos, I'm pretty sure is only here because you can use it to group enemies, and I don't think that utility is enough for it to sit in S tier. But, eh.
Eh,
But yeah, like, Ceto Prime definitely belongs up here. Nodorok definitely does. Torrid definitely does. Trumna Prime definitely does. Uh, I like the Bubonico a lot. I'm not sure I'd call it S tier, certainly not compared to the likes of the Torrid or the Ceto Prime or the Nodorok or the Trumna, but I like it, so I'll not complain too much. I'd like to say that I think the Strun Prime and Coda Sporothrix should be higher, but I'm not actually sure I really believe that. Same is true of the Latran Prime and the Corinth Prime and Kuvahek.
Akuvazar, though.
I I can understand the appeal of it. I think it
It's
falls
very fun.
dramatically short of the Torrid in terms of like a weapon that can clear crowds of enemies.
The only problem I have with it is its limited ammo capacity.
For that matter, I think it falls short of the Trumna Prime and the Stalta in terms of clearing groups of enemies. And all of those weapons I've mentioned have much better ammo economy than the Kuvazar.
That I have no doubt of. The Kuvazar has, what, 10 rounds by default total?
Technically, I think that's true of the Torrid as well. It just also has an Incarnon mode that can get you a bunch of kills and therefore a bunch of ammo in between needing its rounds.
Yeah, fair enough.
Um, Latum is good. Actually, the Latum and the Fenmore and Felarks are all very good weapons. The problem with all of those weapons is that the way they are designed rewards not getting critical hits with them. The problem is that an increasing number of enemies, like their headshot bonus, in addition to being a damage bonus, is also a crit chance bonus, which means these specific weapons are not good against those specific enemies. Um, that is admittedly a fairly niche complaint, but I still think it's a valid one. Kuvanukor was already very good before and then got a kind of an indirect buff. Epitaph Prime, I have yet to encounter any non-boss it won't insta-kill. Uh, Again, as like with the Ceto before, I don't think the Epitaph Prime and the Epitaph should necessarily be in the same tier, but at the same time, I was already having trouble finding things the standard Epitaph couldn't insta-kill. Like the Prime is a buff compared to the generic one, but the generic one was already so powerful that you don't really feel the buff. Spore Lacer is like a cluster grenade launcher. It's really good. Compressa Prime is like a kind of, I think it's like basically it shoots like bubbles that do big status. I've heard good things about it, but I don't have it myself. Acarius Prime was pretty decent before, but got the same indirect buff as the Kuvanukor. Pyrana Prime is kind of difficult to use, but is really strong if you can get it to work. Sky Audit is the same as is the same kind of thing as the Proboscis Cernos before. I think it's only here because of its ability to group enemies, and I don't think that's enough of a reason for it to be an S tier.
Makes more
I
sense on a secondary weapon, though, I will say.
I don't necessarily agree because historically Warframe is a game that has had some much more powerful secondaries than primaries.
Really?
This is less consistently the case now, but over the years that has been the case pretty regularly.
I wouldn't have guessed.
I have not tried the dual Coda Torxica or the dual Toxicist, but I've heard good things about them. I didn't know anyone used the Occucore. I've heard good things about the Tenant Planks. The Nell Prime is a lot of fun to use and can do insane damage if you have a better build for it than I do. The Grimoire is more of a support tool than a weapon. You can use it to buff certain ability stats. That's kind of all it really does, though. Uh, Guva Brack is a secondary shotgun that I've not tried. I'm surprised to see the Catch Moon and Tomb Finger this high up. They were both very, very popular a long time ago. The Catch Moon got a relatively minor nerf that the community made out to be the end of the world, and everyone quit using it after that. So I'm really surprised to see it this high up. But also, where is the Lex Prime? Because
Oh,
ever
it's up there.
is it?
Yep, there it is.
Oh,
Three from three down
this
on the
should
left.
100% be S tier.
Is that before or after the?
It's because of its incarnate adapter.
Yeah,
Its incarnate adapter is basically just a stronger catch, like stronger than the Catch Moon was during its glory days, I think. Um, the Atomos used to be really powerful, but now I think the Tenet Cycron just does the same thing but better. Tenet Diplos are really interesting. I've only had the chance to use them a little bit, and I think they're pretty fun, but I've not really had the chance to see how good they can actually be. Vesper 77 is really interesting and can be really strong if you're better at getting headshots than I am.
understandable.
Rattleguts is an automatic pistol kit gun. I feel like there are better automatic. There's literally other automatic pistols higher up on this tier list. Um, Athadai is an
What
automatic. Go ahead.
I like the static core just because it uses throwing knife animations.
That is really funny, and I don't know if it still does, but I know it used to like guarantee ragdoll enemies.
I find
Athadai
it funny.
honestly feels like a discount brand Nell Prime. It did get a augment recently that might make it really good. I need to test it out some more. Onos, to my disappointment, got a kind of weird indirect nerf recently, but apparently it's popular, so I assume it's still pretty good. Axtiletto Prime, I feel have kind of fallen behind other alternatives in the automatic pistol category, which is probably why they're lower on the list than the Oxamati Prime, which are basically a direct upgrade from them. Euphona Prime I thought was really cool in theory, but I've not really found it to work very well. Sicarus Prime has some fun gimmicks you can do with it, but I don't think it's really amazing. It's pretty
Twin
good.
Grakatas.
What?
Twin Grakatas.
Twin Grakatas exist. Funny
Double
enough,
Grakatas.
I think
Three
they're just
Grakatas.
blatantly worse than a single Grikata because the single Grikata has a lot of real, like, has a couple of really interesting, unique mods for it.
Yeah,
Uh,
but you could get a single primary and then twin secondaries. Three Grakatas.
that is true.
It's incredibly funny, I think.
I feel like the Velox Prime should be higher up than the Axtiletto Prime, higher up than the Athadai too. The problem with the weapon tier list is that it's not really practical to compare weapons across different types. Like, how are you going to compare the Velox Prime, an automatic status focused, I imagine, because the standard version was status focused. But so like an automatic status focused weapon. How are you going to compare that to the Vesper 77, a semi-automatic crit based weapon? Or the Euphona Prime, a single automatic hand shotgun? Like, weapon tier lists have their own issues, basically. Not as much issues as Warframe tier lists, but there's definitely problems.
I do see
Uh,
what you mean.
I think the the Prisma twin gremlins are fun. Same goes for the Prisma Angstrom. I've not seen the single Vosto Prime, but I think it's probably better than the Vosto because it has a pretty good, not amazing, but a pretty good incarnate adapter. The Seer is a cult. Um,
Vesta Prime is lower. Interesting.
we're kind of getting into the realm of weapons that either I don't have or that are just kind of okay. The Vacor Merlock was really good for a long time, but now it's just okay. I mean, admittedly, any semi-automatic pistol is going to be just okay when the Lex Prime and Tombfinger exist. I feel like I don't know. Lido Prime is exclusive to a tier of founder, to the one tier of founder I don't have, so I can't really speak to it.
That's gotta suck.
It does. Um, I'm just gonna kind of skim from here on. If you see anything, call it out. If I see anything, I'll call it out. Acrid used to be just the unquestionable best pistol in the game. I'd say it's still better than C tier, but it's certainly not as good as it used to be. The Stug is widely considered to be the worst weapon in the entire game, so I'm shocked to see it not in D tier.
I saw Traburos, I think his name was, had a challenge mode to beat the star chart with it.
Yep,
I haven't seen it, but I saw that it exists. Wow, people do not like the Vipers, do they?
they're bad.
Okay, fair
Even the Wraith
enough.
Vipers are bad. They have a tiny magazine, they have tiny base damage, they have no critter status practically. Um, Honestly, most of C tier down are mostly just, there are some exceptions, but most of it is just weapons that have other better versions of that, like other better versions of exist. Like
Or are available very,
There's a
very
Xylon
early on.
Prime, there's a Tenet Planks, there's an Act Magnus Prime, there's a Ballistica Prime. I believe there's an Act Bolto Prime, there's a Tenet Cycron, there's an Act Stiletto Prime, there's a Kuva Brack, there's Kuva Stubbas, there's the Vacor Merlock. I don't remember the actual name for it, but there's a faction version of the Gamma Core. There's a Prime. I think there's a Tenet Prime. Two improved versions of. There's a Mara and a Tenet. Prime. Prisma. Prime. Prisma. Prime. Uh, Vandal. Kuva. Vandal. Well, a lot. Prime. I don't think there's a single Eurus Prime. Prime, Huva. There's not an Acolyto Prime either, or an Acolyto Vandal. I'm not sure there's a single Bolto Prime either. Melee.
Unfortunate. Nikana Prime right at the top. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, but it is definitely very good.
Guandao Prime is up there. Understandable.
It is also very good.
I like the regular version, so I can only imagine I'd love the Prime version.
Most likely.
I remember I was building up to it, just did not care enough about the game to keep playing, I guess.
Um,
At least not right now.
I am not really at all surprised to see that there are 3 Nakanas in S tier, because all 3 of them are very good. 2 Scythes, both of those are very good. The Azathane is also good. I'm kind of surprised to see the Gram Prime up here. It's almost certainly the best weapon in its class, but it kind of, a lot of the other weapons in S tier here have some kind of special thing to set them apart. I guess the Guandao and Nakana Prime don't, but they both. Yeah, I don't know. Like the Guandao Prime, Gram Prime, and Nakana Prime all just feel kind of out of place here because and the Orthos Prime too, because like out of all the weapons in S tier here, they're the only ones, and maybe the Cronin too, I don't remember for sure. They're the only ones that don't have some kind of specialized thing they do. Like Thalos and Praetos are both core Incarnon weapons. So like not only are they Incarnon, but they get 5 mutations instead of 4. Glaive Prime is the Glaive Prime. Harmony and Reaper are both scythes, which makes them very good for heavy attack builds, with Harmony in particular having like a special effect that basically makes DOT better. Okina Prime has an Incarnon, Path Assist is also a Glaive. Dual Kara's Prime might actually also fall into the surprisingly generic weapon category. Siam has a special heavy attack. Sepfon is a Zaw Nakana, which means it can have like special abilities that normal Nakanas can't. Stropha and Redeemer are
Understandable.
both Gunblades. What?
Understandable.
Venka Prime has, I believe, a higher combo count maximum than other weapons. Enodim is like the Thalos and the Praetos. It's also a core Incarnon weapon. Dual Vices have some kind of passive that I forget what it does. Azathane is the same as the Scythes. It's really good for heavy attacks. Plague Criplath is also a Zaw, so it's like the Sethphon. And the Quasis Prime has a special heavy attack that stacks a massive amount of slash procs. So like most of the S tier weapons have some kind of specialized thing they do that changes how they play. And then you just have the handful of them that are just, you hit stuff with them.
Hit stuff with them, and they're very good at killing with that.
They are indeed. Kodomotivore is really interesting, but not in ways that really. It's interesting in a way that makes it very powerful, but not in a way that makes it especially more interesting than other weapons. Honestly, Legion has some kind of special ability, but I forget what it is. Same is true of the Lieutenant Grigori. The Spinnerex has some kind of effect that lets you nuke rooms with it, but I don't remember what it is. Dual Ichor and Hate both have Incarnate adapters. Everything. Well, let's see. Chlorophyll has a special heavy attack. Vitrica has a special effect, but it's not very good. A lot melee weapons generally tend to be a lot more generic than guns. There are more of them that have special effects, I think, but not as many that are just interesting. Like a lot of these are just here because they just have really good numbers.
Well, it's hard to beat good numbers.
I mean, as evidenced by S tier, the way you beat good numbers is by having some kind of really interesting special mechanic for the most part. Personally, I think Hate should be the S tier generic scythe instead of the Reaper Prime. I think its incarnate adapter, like Reaper Prime was better for a long time, but I think with its incarnate adapter, Hate is probably the better option. Um,
It is kind of cool to see the Strezza Prime in there.
yeah, it's pretty good. Wolf Sledge is a lot of fun to use, but it relies a lot on enemies being grouped very tightly.
A ceramic dagger, huh?
It has an incarnate adapter that, like, it used to just
Oh
be
yeah.
like one of the worst melee weapons, bar none, but its incarnate adapter is really good. And until they removed stat sticks, it was the unquestionable best stat stick.
Fair enough.
Serafang has a unique ability that makes it really interesting to use, but it's kind of a pain to work around. Uh, I feel like Zenistar should be lower. It used to be good, but it's just kind of trash now. It can't really do much of anything. Jack Katag should be higher. It's what I was using before to show how melee influence works.
Oh yeah. You can build that shit very well.
And as with previous tiers at this point, we're kind of just getting into weapons that there are better versions of for the most part.
Yep, there's the Destrezza, there's the Skana.
Yeah.
Oh, the Fragor.
There is a Fragor Prime, and it, for a long time, funny enough, was the best weapon for finisher attacks.
That is funny.
It's still a pretty good weapon just for doing big damage. Companions. Companion weapons should be separate from companions. I don't think Helios is on the same tier as Nautilus. I don't think Venari should be on the companion tier list because she's technically like a Warframe passive. Also, she's just not very good. She doesn't belong in A tier.
All right.
I think Carrier being in A tier is a leftover from when Vacuum was exclusive to it. Its current ability is that it's like a universal ammo mutator, but I don't think that's good enough for it to be an A tier compared to some of the other stuff. Death Cube can be used to print energy orbs, which is helpful, but it kind of goes to the same place as what I was saying before about helminting dispensary onto a Warframe. There are so many other options that give you other really useful effects, and instead you're just using a crutch for your bad energy management or build crafting.
There's my boy, the Hellman's Charger.
I'm not really sure what the Helminth Charger is useful for, if anything, honestly.
I just think he looks cool.
Like, Nautilus can group enemies, so that's why he's really good. Smita Kavat can boost your crit dam or your crit rate, I think. So it's really good. Panzer Vulpaphyla can revive you if you, or not if you go down, but like if you fall to low health, it can heal you. And it also primes viral on enemies. Now that I think about it, Helios does like generate weak points on enemies. They're not real weak points. You can't trigger weak point effects with them, but they do take extra damage. And if it randomly puts them on the enemy's torso, most abilities target the torso, so it can increase ability damage. Hounds are generally the go-to people use for priming status effects. Diriga can also prime status effects and has some really, and weirdly, can trigger melee influence with its abilities, which means you can run a melee influence build with no lightning damage on your weapons, on your melee weapon at all. If I remember correctly, I believe Jin can revive you if you go down. Same is true of the Vaska Kavat. Worm can negate status effects and does something else that I forget. Sahasa Kubro can dig up energy orbs and resources. There are other good options, but I
Okay.
don't remember what other Kubros are good. I don't remember what Predicites are good, and I don't remember what MOAs are good. Actually interested. See, I'm not sure if they ever like reset these votes at all. So like I feel like Eclipse is still sitting really high from when it was really good in the past, because I don't think this many people are saying it's S tier now. But I don't know.
I do see what you mean about overframe not being exactly accurate in a lot of cases,
Mm-hmm.
especially about it being a popularity contest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like out of the S tier frames, one of like there are only two of them that are really recent in the grand scheme of things, and one of them is the newest frame. I feel like that's mostly just like recency bias in the case of Araxia. And I
Yeah,
think
I wouldn't be
a lot of
surprised.
the other ones that are in S tier are kind of just coasting along on the fact that they used to be like the unquestioned best frames. Like, don't get me wrong, I do think all 6 of these frames that are in S tier are very good. But like I don't think Mesa is dramatically better than like the thing about Saren, Dante, Octavia, Araxia is they can all put out massive damage with abilities or with weapons. Wisp can really only do ability damage, but she also has some of the best support effects in the game to back up her ability damage. Mesa really only has ability damage and not really anything else.
Yeah, I remember using pretty much only her for the entire time I've used her. So
Yep, that's how you build her. If you
she
want to do a
she's good
meme
at
build,
gun.
you can build her for her 1, but it's really, really niche.
I'll be honest, I don't even remember what her one is.
It You cast it and then you shoot things, and every time you shoot things, it builds up damage. And then when you deactivate it, your next shot will do the built up damage, but it only builds up
Oh,
to double the damage of your shot.
I mean, it's nothing to scoff at, but
Double damage on one shot is pretty underwhelming for an active ability when Garuda's passive is up to double damage permanently as long as you are doing or taking damage.
yeah, that's fair. I do really like her 4, though.
Oh yeah, it's really good. And it only got better recently. But it still doesn't change the fact that every other frame in S tier at the very least has like a couple of different niches they fill, and Mesa only has the one.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like, if we want to look at other frames, Volt has ability damage and gun damage and can provide overshields for the team. Uh, Nova has ability damage and kind of sort of gun damage and crowd control. Jade has ability damage, weapon damage, team weapon damage even, not just herself. Team weapon damage or ability strength or shield recharge. Like she can switch between 3 different very strong buffs. Um
Jade is pregnant.
yes, but that has no bearing on her place on a tier list.
It bears repeating, though.
Um
I find it weird. I apologize. I'm a couple beers in.
fair. Citrine's actually kind of hard to get into. I'm not going to do that when I'm probably going to end the stream pretty soon. Let's see. Who else can I point out? Rhino has like big weapon damage and crowd control and tanking. Uh, yeah, I don't know. Like compared to the rest of S tier, Mesa just doesn't feel like she really fits the description.
Nope, I understand.
Like,
She doesn't do a whole lot besides weapon ability damage.
yeah. Like maybe they could have been trying to say, "Oh, she's the best ability damage dealer." But if that was actually the goal, I think there are probably other better alternatives. Probably Volt.
I've been getting really into Cyto 9, though.
He's a lot of fun. Um,
When I can actually hit my shots with him, unfortunately, which
yeah,
is not often.
and when other players who are visible aren't drawing fire towards you.
That's why you gotta separate yourself from the group. Pick off a flanking route.
But yeah, like honestly, as hard as it makes it to talk shit about the tier list, I do think it is broadly pretty accurate that they don't have anything below B tier.
All the frames are good at something.
Uh,
Can be used. Can
yeah.
be used well.
Well, I think that's probably
Yeah.
about all I have to say. I could go into as minute details as looking at specific builds. but I don't
We'd
think
be
it's
here
worth doing
all
that.
night.
The one thing I will say to finish this off is that one of the big issues that overframe has is that, as with the tier list, what builds show up first is
Netflix and
also
chill with
decided
Prime.
by votes, like votes from the player base rather than anything else. And a lot of the time, that means that builds that are out of date will show up closest to the top. So, for example, this Wisp build that is the most popular one is from update 35.0, and the current version is update 39.0.7. And this does not have, yeah, this is missing a mod and an arcane that I would say are now basically a mod, an arcane, and an augment that I would say are now all basically essential to a Wisp build.
I like how you scroll once and the votes go down to immediately one.
Yeah.
So people are just not looking all that hard, huh?
No. Chances are people are just loading the page exactly as it loads. They're going to the top build and they're just copying that. They're probably not even looking at the long extended guide for it. The guide that is really not. I'm not sure there's any helmet ability I'd put on Wisp right now. Roar isn't bad. I'll give this build that. Like, I think, well, okay. This has primed sure-footed. That's immediately points against it. But I think this was at least a pretty good build for the time it was made. Pretty good, not amazing. But for it definitely could have been better for the time it was made, and for now, it is far from optimal now. Even this one that is apparently up to date is missing the new augment that I'd say is okay, well, it's missing the augment because her ultimate is gone.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah,
You disagree?
yeah. It seems to me like this build is designed entirely for support. And let's and while Wisp is a very good support, Wisp is also a very good crowd clearing frame. Game should be back up on the screen. And Yeah, that killed all but one of the enemies here pretty quick, and the last one here certainly didn't last much longer either. That, and my build also generates universal orbs, so if somehow the healing moat can't keep up with damage people are taking, they get health, and if anyone needs energy, they get energy. This provides
Yeah,
more
I do it.
support than either of the top builds on overframe, while also putting out more damage than a lot of damage dealing builds are capable of. If I was going to replace an ability, it would be the 2. But honestly, even that I'd hesitate to replace because that can increase the range of Breach Surge. Like, maybe I would throw Roar on there, but I mean, it already does a ton of damage. Maybe I'd throw a grouping ability on there, but it's got, like, all the abilities have pretty good range, so I don't need enemies to all be clustered in one spot. I just, I mean, sure, technically, this build probably has more range than mine does. Or not range, more strength, I mean. It has significantly more strength, but I mean, you saw the damage I did. And
Yeah.
if I were to actually, let's go ahead and put this in the middle, just because realistically, I'd be able to preset that in most missions. Even if I make the enemies able to move, it's barely going to make any difference. Like, they still can't do anything because Wisp is invisible when she's airborne.
That is pretty damn effective.
Yeah, like, I have, like, what? About half this guy's ability strength, and I am able to just clear steel path enemies with steel path enemies of a level I'm not likely to encounter in a real mission with very little difficulty. And I have more support than that build does. And
A lot of wasted mods, it seems.
supposedly that's a build that's up to date for the current version of the game. A build that has horrible energy economy, that has honestly less valuable support than mine does, in my opinion. Like, it has more breach surge coverage, and it has faster healing. And that's about all it really offers. But breach surge coverage doesn't really matter when you have enough energy to just cast it again, like I would have, but this guy wouldn't. And the amount of healing I feel is probably, like, the reduced healing I think is probably made up for by the universal orbs. Like my build will just always be generating so much orbs that there will always be basically limitless health and energy all over the ground.
when you accidentally breed a machine gun and ICBM missile together. It's one of the suggested builds for. It looks like the Exceltra.
Yeah. Yeah, this website shows you other builds by the same person when you're looking at a build.
Interesting.
But yeah, like I don't know. I feel like this website is just kind of filled with people that just I don't know.
Don't necessarily know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it.
And a bunch of people who vote on it that also don't know what they're talking about.
That's also a big part of it. Like I think I'm gonna guess this uses the augment for breach surge. Really? This one's interesting. Like this is at least someone doing something creative with the build. And I like it a lot. But like most of these are just people just building wisp for the moats to just dump out as much buffing as possible. And that's just not really worth it, I don't think. Like honestly, I could probably get away with more ability strength than I have. I could drop Augur Message in favor of Blind Rage. Like lose some duration, gain a lot of strength. But I mean, I don't need it. I don't know. I feel like a lot of people just build. Well, okay. It doesn't help, too, that two of the biggest build crafting Warframe YouTubers are people that don't actually know how the mechanics of the game work and just are using builds from members of their community that they think have good builds. And maybe the person does have good builds, but not for the reason the YouTuber thinks it is good.
So we're being sold on these builds by someone who doesn't know the mechanics,
Yeah,
whether or not the builds are good themselves.
pretty much. Yeah. Um, and a lot of the times the builds aren't good, but
Oh yeah.
I will go ahead and say right now, and this is, I'm sure, a very, very hot take if anyone
Go
ever
for it.
happens across it. I'd say 99% of the time, any build that has primed sure-footed on it is probably trash.
That does sound like a hot take.
Well, yeah, primed sure-footed is like the most popular Exilus Warframe mod. But as I see it, if you run primed sure-footed in your Exilus slot, you are giving up an actually valuable effect you could have there in favor of getting something you could have by just being better at the game.
Just use Iron Skin.
That also works. Like, consider for a moment, there are people out there putting prime sure-footed on their Rhino
Why?
because that's what the YouTuber told them to do.
But
Or
don't.
rather, the YouTuber told
Just
them
press
put
2.
prime sure-footed on every Warframe without
Just press 2.
considering any caveats. But like, I've seen plenty of Warframe builds, like builds for frames like Atlas, who is already immune to knockdowns as long as he's on the ground, or for Lavos, who is immune to all status effects, which includes knockdown, within 10 seconds of picking up a universal orb, which he generates a massive amount of. And people are putting prime sure-footed on those. Or on Neja, whose warding halo is basically just Iron Skin, but a little bit different. Ureli, whose Marilena is basically Iron Skin, but a little different. There are so many frames with some form of innate knockdown immunity that people throw prime sure-footed on, either because they don't know and someone just told them, "Oh, you should have this mod on all your frames," or like there are some people who will insist, "Oh, but there's such and such caveat to the knockdown immunity of this frame. So I just have it on here just in case I get hit with a knockdown in between." You're not going to get hit with a knockdown in between your universal orb up time on Lavos. It's not going to happen unless you're just not playing the game. Just use the abilities. You don't even have to worry about energy for Lavos. There is no way you're not generating enough universal orbs to keep uptime on his passive.
Yeah.
And if somehow you're not, put Arcane Universal Fallout on him and just set all of his abilities to radiation before you cast them.
The first comment under Prime Sure Footed on the wiki is just should be changed to Prime to skill issue.
Yeah, that's about right. I think adding Prime sure-footed to the game was one of the worst one of the worst like mod decisions D has ever made. And while they can't put that back in the box now that it's out of the box, I think they could make sure-footed not be a Exilus mod, and I think it would serve a comparable effect to getting rid of it without making as many people as angry.
Be sure to use this on Atlas. Also subsume Nourish on every frame. Oh, these guys are calling out a specific YouTuber that I'm not going to do that. I'd rather not do that on stream. I have no idea who this is, but
You could send it to me on Discord. I can tell you if it's one of the two I'm thinking of.
not bad. I will send a screenshot real quick.
Well, you'll send a screenshot, but it's seeming less and less like it'll be real quick.
I'm literally sending it now.
Yeah, that's about who I expected.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
pretty sure I have also said similar about him on stream, but I will refrain for now just in case I haven't.
Understandable. See, just
But
as a Rhino main, I forget about knockdown a lot of the time. So I can understand how annoying getting knocked down out of nowhere can be. And also B, the idea of actually just wasting a mod slot just so you don't have to deal with it. I can see it.
realistically, I think broadly speaking, anyone who complains about being knocked down out of nowhere is either not really paying any attention to the game at all, or is just saying that to make themselves feel better about having been hit by something completely avoidable.
Well, that's probably the case in my instance, but yeah, still though.
But yeah, I'm not gonna say it's 100% universal, but I think generally speaking, most builds that you see with primed sure-footed on them, more often than not, that's an indication that the person who put the build together doesn't really know how to play the game. And that most of the time turns to all of the time if it's Rhino or Nezha or Yoreli or Atlas or Lavos. Uh, I'd say for most of the frames that have invisibility too. But I think that'll be the end of the stream. So if by some miracle anyone is watching, thanks for watching. This is kind of atypical for me, but who knows? Maybe this'll actually get views, unlike my other streams. And if so, maybe just shitting on tier lists will become my content direction from now on.
Went from making one to shitting on one. Well, shitting on a couple.
But if anyone's there, thanks for watching. And assuming I don't get lazy like all of last week, I'll be back on Thursday, probably with Star Rail.
Gotta love it.